The city of Marquette was named after the Jesuit missionary explorer, Father Jacques Marquette, who founded Michigan's first European settlement in 1668, Sault Ste. Marie, and later St. Ignace. Today, Marquette has a population of over 21,300 people, and it is the largest city in the Upper Peninsula. It has been a popular tourist destination as far back as the late 19th century, and it was nationally known as a summer haven. Since 1847, the major industry in the area was mining along the Marquette Iron Range. During the 1850s, Marquette was linked by rail to many mines and became the leading shipping center of the Upper Peninsula. Today, Marquette is still a beautiful tourist destination, with the significant mining industry still intact, shipping hematite ores and enriched iron ore pellets from nearby mines and pelletizing plants. About 7.9 million gross tons of pelletized iron ore passed through Marquette's Presque Isle Harbor in 2005. As successful as the area has been for tourism and industry along the south shore of Lake Superior, there has also been incredible tragedy on the Big Lake. Capturing and preserving the immense history on or under the waters of Lake Superior is the Marquette Maritime Museum. This Lake Superior Circle tour is honored to have been given the opportunity to experience a detailed tour of the museum and the history of the region by the director, Hilary Billman.
Welcome to Marquette Maritime Museum. Our museum has been in operation for 35 years this year. The building that we're in is the old City of Marquette Waterworks building. It was built in 1891 and it was designed by renowned Marquette architect named D. Fred Charlton. We have an exhibit in the museum that is dedicated to the history of Marquette Maritime Museum. It started out as just an idea from what they called the Committee of Six gentlemen in Marquette who really thought that as a port city, we needed a maritime museum. And with a lot of volunteer work, we finally were able to get this waterworks building and turn it into what we have today. In our collections, we do have two Native American birch bark canoes that one of them is from 1854, so they're pretty rare to have one in this shape in the museum. We'll head in here where we actually have a lot of interesting artifacts about shipwrecks, because Lake Superior, which is the biggest of the Great Lakes, and it's also the deepest point is just outside of Munising, 1,333 feet. It also can be a very angry lake, so we have quite a lot of our exhibit space is dedicated to Marquette shipwrecks. So as you can see on these walls over here, we've got just a lot of the Lake Superior shipwrecks mentioned. We have the Henry B. Smith, which is a really interesting shipwreck around the area. This ship went down in the storm of 1913. It was a pretty famous storm. There were quite a few shipwrecks that year. What's interesting about the Henry B. Smith is the shipwreck was not found until 2013, so 100 years later. People are always asking about, modern shipwrecks and finding shipwrecks still. There are still people out there finding shipwrecks, so the Henry B. Smith is a great example of that. Over here, we have some information on the U.S. Life-Saving Service. The U.S. Life-Saving Service started in Marquette in 1891. The building was built the same year as the City Waterworks, where the museum is housed. What we're really proud of with the U.S. Life-Saving Service building in Marquette is Captain Henry J. Cleary, who we have up here on the wall, and we have a lot of other pictures of Henry J. Cleary. He actually spent 25 of his 37 years here. He was world renowned for just his skill in training his volunteers and actually going out and saving people on shipwrecks. So the current Coast Guard building in Marquette is actually the first one that was named after a person rather than a place. Most of the time it would be called like Station Marquette. The one here is called Station Cleary. So now there have been other ones since then that have been named after people, but this is the first one in the United States to be named after a person. The Coast Guard the current Coast Guard building, which is right next door to the museum, was built starting around 2007, and they moved in 2009. And you can see a lot of the photographs here of just surf boats and just a lot of people doing a lot of saves on the Great Lakes and on Lake Superior. And we also have some history on the U.S. Coast Guard. Coast Guard started in 1916. The U.S. Marine Revenue Service and the U.S. Life Saving Service combined to make the Coast Guard. So we've had Coast Guard here since 1916, and they're still going strong because Lake Superior is still angry sometimes, so we still need them. Of course, you can't really talk about Lake Superior shipwrecks without talking about the Edmund Fitzgerald. So we have a nice Edmund Fitzgerald exhibit set up here with all kinds of information on the history of the ship. We have a video that shows the final radio transmission of the Edmund Fitzgerald. We also have a life ring up on the corner here that was found August 4th, 1976 on a cliff 40 feet above the level of Lake Superior, which just shows you the power of that storm. So just a lot of information here. We have a lot of newspaper headlines and just different stories about the Edmund Fitzgerald. And then one of my favorite exhibits in here is this diorama that we have of the Marquette Harbor, which this is the Marquette Harbor in the 1950s, and so it shows the ore dock as it was still a working ore dock when it still had the trestle and the railroad car going into town. So it's a really nice depiction of what it used to look like, and where the coal yards are over on the far side is where we actually have Matson Park now, where we're having, it's Harbor Fest weekend in Marquette, so there's going to be a concert down there now, but it's strange for some people to see it as a coal yard, but it actually was a coal yard. And then we also, this was a port city, so fishing has always been a big part of the history of Marquette. So we have an exhibit here on the Anderson Fish Company, the Parker Fish Company, and now we have what is Phil's Fish Company down in the lower harbor there. So just lots of information on how fishing started here and just the progression of it throughout the years. Okay, so I think the biggest surprise for people when they come into this museum is to walk into our main gallery room here and to see our collection of Fresnel lenses. So the Marquette Maritime Museum has one of the best collections of Fresnel lenses anywhere because of the number and the order that we have them in. So Fresnel lenses go from size 1 to size 6, number 1 being the largest, and we actually have a number 2 Fresnel lens from Standard Rock. There are no number 1 lenses on the Great Lakes, so number 2 would be the biggest lens on the Great Lakes. So we have the Standard Rock lens, we have the Big Bay lens, we have Huron Island, and then Marquette. So what's interesting about our collection is it goes 2, 3, 3.5, 4. So you can see the progression of sizes in these lenses, and they really are stunning. They're pieces of beautiful art if you look at them closely. We have quite a bit of information on just the history of the different lighthouses in the area, and different lighthouse keepers, and lots of beautiful pictures of what things used to look like. I think the one that people tend to be the most interested in is the Standard Rock Light. It's the most remote lighthouse in the United States, and there was an explosion there in the 60s, which ended up killing one of the service members out there, and since then it has not been an active lighthouse, but it's an interesting story, and if you see pictures of it, it looks like the loneliest, most desolate place on the lakes. And then behind you over here, we have pictures of the Maryland, the shipwreck Maryland. And what's interesting about this shipwreck in this part of our exhibit is it's the last example of the Coast Guard using sort of the old school old school technology in a shipwreck and the new school technology. So we have the Lyle gun, and we have all of the tally board and the faking box, all of this stuff, and the breeches buoy. This is all old school technology in a shipwreck. And what's interesting about the Maryland, which was the early 1950s, is they also used a helicopter. So they tried the old school stuff, which had been around since the 1800s, and then went up and then also did the helicopter to save everybody. So what's the museum, usually on Coast Guard Day, every year does what we call a Lyle gun shoot. So we'll take one of the actual Lyle guns here, and this is the one we used just this past August 4th, and you can see how shiny it is because we polished it up for everybody. So we do an example of a Lyle gun shoot, and so on the shore there'll be a Lyle gun, and we put gunpowder in, and we shoot off the line to show people what it looked like. We only use a ½ ounce of gunpowder as opposed to the 8 ounces that you would normally use when you were shooting off a Lyle gun, because we don't want to hurt any of our spectators with the gunpowder and the explosion. But it is a really interesting way for people to see sort of how it worked back then. The line would be shot out, it would go over the ship, and then you would send a thicker line out there and then set up all of these apparatus to get the breeches buoy so you could actually start saving people. So it was just a complex process, but when the Life Saving Service and the Coast Guard was using this, they would practice all of the time, and every crew member had a number, and the number was assigned to a specific job, but every time they practiced it, you didn't know what number you were going to get. So everybody was fully trained on doing every element of setting all of this up, because as you can see, it'd be so easy to get lines tangled and things broken. So this is actually a great example of what it used to look like to save everybody. So what's interesting about this room is it's got a completely different echo than in the gallery, is this room is dedicated to the memory of World War II submarines and all the crew members. Captain David McClintock is from Marquette. He was the captain of the USS Darter, and so we've got a diorama here and a lot of information about Captain McClintock and the USS Dace. So the USS Darter and the USS Dace were two submarines that were in the Battle of Leyte Gulf against Japanese troops. It were the two submarines against about 32 Japanese warships and submarines and all kinds of different boats, and the Americans outwitted them, and they won that battle. And it was just, and after that, the Americans were able to take over the Philippines, and it was just a great start to a battle for the Americans to start winning. And we were proud to have David McClintock from Marquette. He was a great guy, and so he and his family have given us a lot to make this room sort of what it is. And we also have this this is one of my favorite things here too. This is a working periscope from a World War II submarine. So you can actually look in it and you can see the lighthouse. The tours usually start here. We talk a lot about the architecture of the building and just how it used to be the City Waterworks building. Over here you can see the Coast Guard building that was, they occupied it starting in 2009. And then just kind of swinging around, you can see we've got this fantastic view of Lake Superior from our museum, so we're in a perfect spot. And we've got the old U.S. Life Saving Service building in white over there, which looks pretty similar to the newer Coast Guard building. But this whole area is called Lighthouse Point. It's a 7-acre property that was deeded from the Coast Guard to the city of Marquette in 2016. So the Lighthouse building is sort of the iconic structure in Marquette. It's not the first lighthouse we had on this property. The first one was built in 1853. It was about in the same location, and it was a tower in a separate structure. but it was stone and wood, and it just could not withstand the weather. So this one that we see here now was built in 1866, and it was originally built as what they called a schoolhouse design, which is a very popular design for lighthouses architecturally on the Great Lakes. There are a lot with the schoolhouse design. This particular one, they added a second story to it and bricked in the outer stairs and did a few other things in 1910. So now it's a completely unique structure. So there is no other lighthouse that looks just like this. It's that beautiful red. Everybody thinks it's always been red, but it wasn't painted red until 1965, and the paint is called Heartthrob Red. So yeah, so it really is a beautiful building, and any view that you can get it from it out here is just fantastic. We do sunrise tours here and evening tours, usually once a month for each, and you know, we offer free school field trip programs. This year we've had over 600 school kids come through on a free program. Usually it's when school's still in session in May and June, but we also do, you know, sometimes if there's church groups or something, we also offer them the same thing. So we really try to give back to the community in that way. We are a nonprofit, so that means we're always raising funds, but we do feel like that's a good way we can give back to the community with the free school field trip program. One of our displays in there, which I didn't point out, is of the ore dock. So there's a video in there that shows a drone view of loading the ore dock. So we talk a lot about the ore docks. We actually call the ore docks every morning and get a boat schedule so we can let people know, because you can go out and watch them loading the boats. It's really fun to watch them loading an ore boat with those giant arms coming down. It's really loud and it's just a fun thing to do. So yeah, so we do a lot with that. We have worked with tall ships in the past. Anything that floats on the water, then we're interested in. Even anything that sinks in the water that's a shipwreck, we're also interested in it. So yeah, we definitely try to, anything with Lake Superior is our theme.